Untitled Rinpoche.
Untitled Rinpoche, Tudang Komper.
Untitled Rinpoche.
Tamzang.
Alisweo, Dubupakia. Chudon number, Untitled. I was Kalasati.
Remember, said he already had breakfast.
Not so gong tong chai. We are already evening dinner.
They already had dinner.
Okay. Now. Son Jie Qiu Dang Cuo Jie Qiu Nam La Chan Qiu Bar Den Dan Le Jiao Sen Qi Dai Gen Jian Sen Jian Biao Cuo Nam Ji Zhuo Lai Ben Ser San Jian Zhen Bar Qiu San Jie Qiu Dang Cuo Jian Qiu Nam La Chan Qiu Bar Den Dan Le Jiao Sen Qi Dai Gen Jian Sen Jian Biao Cuo Nam Ji Zhuo Lai Ben Ser San Jian Zhen Bar Qiu.
Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings.
Mô Nông Quan Đại Nhâm Bê Xem Chiang Tham Chiang Đề Hoa Tăng Đề Vệ Chiang Tăng Đêm Bà Ra Chiang Ra Chiang Đông Hên Tăng Đông Hên Chiang Chiang Tăng Ra Hoa Ra Chiang Ra Chiang Đông Hên Mên Bên Đề Hoa Tăng Mên Ra Hoa Ra Chiang Ra Chiang Nhẹ Rinh Cha Tăng Nhẹ Tăng Ra Ta Nhôm Lan Hên Bà Ra Chiang Ra Chiang Ma Nam Kha Tăng Nhâm Bê Xem Chiang Tham Chiang Đề Hoa Đề Vệ Chiang Tăng Đêm Bà Ra Chiang Ra Chiang Đông Hên Tăng Đông Hên Chiang Chiang Tăng Ra Hoa Ra Chiang Ra Đông Hên Mên Bên Đề Hoa Tăng Mên Ra Hoa Ra Chiang Ra Nhẹ Rinh Cha Tăng Nhẹ Tăng Ra Ta Nhôm Lan Hên Bà Ra Chiang Ra Chiang
May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they not be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Sayen Bhajya Soyen Mendo Dram Rera Len Yen Sanje Xiang La Mei Dian Parva Yen Rong Guan Nam Da Rinpoche La Kokam Sam. Welcome everybody. We have a small announcement. So at the beginning of the break, it will be the break after 1.5 hours. And at the beginning of the break, Drupal Rinpoche will give Kurukula long. So please stay these 5 minutes when the break begins for the Kurukula long. Okay, Tashidele, thank you so much.
This meeting is being recorded.
Kita total cho ba che ja chila ta to le to la ya to la ba la xiang ga ta ba yo de jin ge de la ya sa lo to je je te le la da ba ba me la je je ka mo 밤노르바 자와르공바 가줄라만노도소한데 오미시제 여보 다사사지가 영원이라 생초가 무슨 도대바 사벨라미 잡라소한데 스스로가 저자 주진 신야 소배봉쇼가 지라서 생지도도 나치나 담바 주제는 더더소 Deni churro number 3 ta pardo ko chiare 3 pardo number 2 song chertang 3 ta pardo chikale shena jerese nyamdo loya ona 3 ti jinde de semin chago yore 책당 또 온전히 이따다시 로까만 이 pardo to ta 책지 참침보래 참말 요래 그 지진이 생각도 저에 되면 바둑을 또 잡으러 망고 요래 요나지 지진이 있다다지 로야 다책요 봐요 근데 지진이 쉬어요 마지들이 쉬어요 되게 제가 땅 찬이 되지 저도 카동을 로네들이 책이 이렇게 말하더니 바둑을 사용 거요래 바둑 무식이 되니 추추었다고 또 주제 고체에 가지고 고체에 되니 다다 고아말로나들이 봐도 얘기 무시 쪽으로에 무식나서에 되게 샤무송 되게 진짜 냠이 있는데 로야 계시면요.
And friends, today I'm going to give some instructions on the Bardo. And so generally it is said that there are 6 Bardos. And so together with the teachings, the instructions, there is also root text that we can recite. And so if that goes along with the teaching, then it's also beneficial for the meaning of the words to actually really arise in your mind, really stay in your mind. And these particular root verses on the 6 Bardos are widely known. Many people have it. So this is what I'm going to introduce you to. And actually there are many teachings on that, and I also myself have given teachings on this particular root text before. But it's good to have this kind of as an ongoing prayer, like a daily prayer that you continuously read even after the teachings, because when these teachings are in your mind, these words are in your mind, then later when you're in the Bardo after you have died, the Bardo consciousness possesses clairvoyant abilities. It is said that there is 5 different kinds of kind of supernatural powers that the consciousness has in the Bardo. And so due to this brightness of consciousness in the Bardo, all the words of Dharma that you have heard in your lifetime will become very clear at that time. Even while you're alive, you might not have understood the meaning of it, even if you don't understand it now in the Bardo, because the consciousness is so bright, you will understand the actual meaning of these words will arise within the consciousness. And so that's also why it's important to recite these prayers, this particular prayer too, on an ongoing basis as a practice.
따와 또 마도 그 제발 따와 또 정체되다 선마 봐도 가래 있는 쪽발이 쪽발이 가래 제대로 좀마다 통구요리 좀마다는 차담도 바라서 돌리 니지 싶으면 좀마다 통구리 좀마다 통들이 봐도려야지 좀마다 통투구요리 들이 좀마다 통화도 통선이 요리 들이 게임을 배수말이 따도 손나 갭티 grup에 쇼를 잘 듣지랑 진에서 다서 따도 손이 가자 탐절했더니 답변하면도 차야요 말이지. 제가 이제 따 니지 속과 다 손나 드리텔라 메게벨에 뭐 심한가 답게티 다로를 탐지 동반이로 다 그요래 동담들 좀 동반이 있어 따와 마도와 답지 다 첸들의 신이 무엇든 심한의 신들의 탐지들이 얘네들이 다 바도 넘버 족지들이 이 제량들이 조가 책을 말이 들이 바도 챕터를 장매가 요래 가자 소설을 때에 이들은 무엇든 지마 다 딸애들이 너무 가차와 무슨 샤용물요래 따와 또 마도 제발이 약고 신은 어떻게 다 냠이 제비 용띠인지 따뜻하다 그래 냠이 시송창아 우리 데려라 이것들이 최대다 선모 바도도 찍으래 이 게임은 생은 포타라고 저리 그래서 빠져 쪽이 빠져는 빠른 폴로 포타라고 그래 코를 생긴 탐지들이 강의들 나오 나만지들이 네 주지 오더니 나기 니들 만지기 때문에 들이 빠져 자는 이 빠져 사요 샤르무요래 다 도서 나기 니요 말이들이 빠져 샤르게 요 말이들이 님이 있어들이 홀로 좀 매대 빼세다 제만에서 만나지 게들 요거 초를 저들이랑 진에서 다좀 따도 좀 가자 또 맞도 제발들 다 돌아다니다 그래서 기자한테 하고는 들이 빠져 같이 있는 생이나 다 맞도 탐질 된다고 해서 벤들이 다다다 다른 grup으로 무슨 말이 고소다다 공통이다 고모래 들이 쇼케 다티 둘 맞을 나와 저도 대다오래 두코는 좋아요 말들이 내가 쳐보간 것들이 님치기 제발 때 니막을 나와서 저도 포도로더니 또 니발에 단 시보를 이제 또 tel무보다 제마시네 들이 대독 좋아나 봐서 연구 요래 이제 뒤자와도 하고는들이 하던 피받지 뭐 요래
So about Bardo, there are some things that are very important to understand, and these were also explained by the Vidyadhara Chimli Lingpa, and also Lord Jigten Sumgön had said that I'm a yogin who has realized that this life, future lives, and the Bardo are one. Therefore, I have no fear of death, having realized that. And so the difference lies in having or not having realized the view. If one has realized the view, which is the natural state of the mind, then to such a person who has realized the view, this life, future lives, and the Bardo all become the same. It becomes the same because such a person has seen that this life is illusory. And if you see this life as illusory, then all these thoughts of attachment and aversion will become liberated into their natural place. So when all dualistic grasping collapses, you will see everything as an illusion. And if you see everything as an illusion now, then also in the Bardo, you will be able to see the Bardo as an illusion. So then there is two different ways of seeing things in an illusory way. Chitsamila Ripa had said, a person who has realized the view, to such a person who has realized the view, the 10 virtuous actions will naturally arise, and the 10 non-virtuous actions will be purified or will settle into themselves on their own. So those individuals who have realized the view, to them, there is nothing that is impure any longer. Only purity arises. And that is because they have purified all dualistic thoughts, all dualistic clinging. And when there is no dualistic thought in the mind, then naturally the 10 non-virtuous actions and all the grasping, the fixation on things to be real, all of that becomes purified. Everything becomes purified into emptiness. And also, ultimately, karma, cause and effect is emptiness. So, on the other hand, those who have not realized the view, to them this life appears to be real. They cling to the true existence of various appearances. And to those individuals experience 6 Bardos or intermediate states. And actually, it's even more than that. So the various different states appear, actually limitless intermediate transitional states appear to such a person, and it's very individual. So if we do not purify the grasping at the concrete existence of appearances now in this life, then later on in the Bardo, the suffering, the miserable appearances that manifest will be even more intense and real than they are now in this life. So to a person who has realized that it is the view, it is different. So the difference comes in, the difference depends on whether or not one has realized the view. And so if you recognize that, you will think that actually it is important to engage in practice. And if you really know how to practice, then just naturally, this life, the Bardo and future lives, all become one. So the mind is like a camera where you store all the pictures, all the films. And then the film that has been taken comes from the fixation of not thinking there's a me, a self. And this is where all the difficulties in samsara for sentient beings arise from. It is because there is this ongoing thought of me, and therefore there is a grasping to a duality of self and other. So it is this self-grasping, grasping at the me that keeps taking pictures or kind of recording, and then that is stored within the camera, which is the mind. And then as long as it is there, then the various projections, the film, will become projected. So for someone who has realized that there is no self and other, there is then nothing to be projected. There's no film there. And therefore samsaric appearances cannot manifest to such a person. So that is why Milarepa had said that to such a person, the 10 virtuous actions arise on their own, and the 10 non-virtuous actions are purified into their natural state. So the difference lies in having or not having realized the view. And so this is how it is when someone has realized the view. So if you understand the view, then you know you know how to listen to these instructions on the Bardo, and then you know that also this is how then somebody who has not realized the view must be. And so, for example, also as our perception is so different, and that shows the view actually. For example, just before, Drikung Rinpoche had said that we just had dinner, and I said here we had breakfast. So then this is our perception. So over there it's evening and here it's in the morning time. But it is said that actually time never changes. It's our perception of time that changes, our perception changes. But there is no real change or difference in time actually. It's just that people look at the sun and the moon and the movements of sun and moon, and then based on that they kind of fabricate this concept of time and say that this is now here it's morning and here it's in the evening, and that is something people hold to be true. This is how it is, and due to the grasping at the true existence of people's ideas, then as a result they experience all kinds of feelings of happiness and suffering and so on. So in any case, if one simply understands the view, the benefits are so great.
This is the Bardo number 2. The Bardo number 2 Jima Zitini. Soba Bardo is on the Tishi. Soba Bardo Kare is in the Tang Hamility, Borne, Sumility, Mahi, literally, Richard, the Rang, Leg, Wange, Le Karasa, lay Tesabina. 가서 차트 속으로들이 물을 못 채래 터들 좋아 조건은 제발다고 물을 못 채들이 다른 걸 내가 갖고 기분 줘버렸더니 들이 물이 터들이 마잉갈라 쇼를 뒤다면 끼와랭이 되라 끼니 네바바라데 들이 물이 터들이 물이 끼와랑이 다 네바스 갑들라서 들이 끼니 바도서 되게 송어요래 근데 고 가리 쳐버려들 스바발로는 거 쳐버려 스바발로니 다 물이 끼와랑이래 들이 들이양 로아도 소소라 니모 조고왕 레롱이 지선당니 로아도 가사카는 참 저거 끼아린 저거요래 들이 다다 물이 터져들이 레장보 들이 추른 날에서 송들이 니네 리는 손을 물이 터송벨라 라리다 사다 메르티 터송다다 니네 피움감도 송고요래 대사지 좀 되게 들이 포르신지 답절라 뒤져든 양미지 두고 각 자성 코도서 콩 영들라 들이 니네 자기 니네 레송을 데 집앞에는 좋아져서 다시 호흡신지 담절라 제발도 나와 물이 좀 터버체들이 소정도만 나와 인송 같은 소정도만 날 때송에 될때 짱 말하는 거다 소정 기와를 되버리다 마잉을 물을 랑으로 될 찌니 다 내야다 물 내버들 찌니 봐도 어지 되지
So, of the 6 Bardos, the last Bardo, to which we will come at the end, is called the Bardo of Becoming. And the Bardo of Becoming is when we are in the Bardo and we are about to take birth again. So, this is the time where the consciousness has left behind the previous body and has not yet taken on a new body. So the consciousness without a body follows the karmic winds. And then depending on what karma one has accumulated, one will take birth. So if one has accumulated virtuous karma, then one may take birth as a precious human being. And the precious human birth is said to be the most unique, special birth of the 6 realms of samsara. Only if one has practiced a great deal of merit can one take birth as a precious human being. And so then the consciousness enters the womb of the mother and takes birth as a human being as a result of virtuous actions accumulated in the past. And so then the moment one has entered the womb until one dies again, and this entire period is called the Bardo of living. And so when does actually this Bardo really begin? This one actually begins in the Bardo of becoming. So you're still basically in the Bardo, you're not yet a human being. So this is really where the Bardo of living begins. Basically it begins the moment you enter the womb of the mother. Once you have become a human being and take birth. Or you take birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara depending on your karma. The 6 afflictive emotions are the karmic winds that will kind of propel us into any of the 6 realms of samsara, where we then take birth. And we take birth as a human being as a result of having practiced ethical discipline. It is said that someone who takes, for example, the Nyungne or the Nyingne vows, those 8 Sojong vows, a single time, every time you take them, you have the cause for birth as a human being, as a god or a human being. So this is explained in the benefits of the Nyingne practice. And the Buddha gave this as a method for samsaric sentient beings who do not always have an opportunity to engage in practice because ordinary people for the most part, are distracted by ordinary samsaric activities. And so for them, there is the practice of the Nyingne and the Nyungne, and it is said that if you keep those Sojong vows, then even as a samsaric ordinary sentient being, then each time they keep those vows, they create a cause for birth as a precious human being. And so just recently, we did this practice here. And so when you practice virtue in this way, therefore you take birth, for example, as a human being. And so again, the moment you enter the womb of the mother until you die, this entire life is what is referred to as the bardo of living.
tira kare chugore. Ta le jubde hwami ba ti ha ko gore. Kia le jubde ha ko kia ngapse do le jubde do so tata chupo mare che de chupo mare so ne. Le kia le jubde de tina le jubde de chu sabje zaware le jubde ha ko so na. Tri tira tri rang to po to thab yo mare. Tri rang David jade rangi ji ga phima de David jat ja ha ko dogi jat ha ko na. Ramji ke lang dor ma do cha yong gore de le jubde se de chu gore. Deba ye so da chu gore chu. Sabe samlo ta o te le jubde deba re la mari samlo ta na. O ta ta mata to ro nyam de yore. Tang so san no chu ba re tu sen da ma sen chu ba re. Dul ka ka re de dok chowa ka ka re de ka re ki che so le ta le gre. O ta le ta chi bo re de. Le da ka re ki sta do so ta le de se bu ta do. Chu sam jin sam lo tang ti chek de sam lo tang ti jibre ko lo sam lo tang ti je ji ti su gu sum ba re jibre ke ji sam ra so i ti ti yu mo ba ra so ti jak so lo wa dok ta dong na dang je ba ti ta ti da sam ba da ni ji ra so ti la ta me le ti ne ka la ta me le ti ta tu sa je ko so gra ji sa je ko bang de la so ba ti ge de ne ma no wa sam lo tang o ta ni le sa na Tira, Ramaranga told me, two Sunday, Gomde, that is all similar told out. Potage is all similar told out. Send the Amazon, send the Amazona, Trika Raman race at that. Raga Diaz, Ramani, don't get Ramani to take on Raman dinner to eat the Lange, that Chilaratini, that Ranga Amazon, that's that, couple give us our tabje. Give up the Delas of Waterji, Magiva Chibache, Three Jim Lesomani. Oh, lady of the Hakos, get it to a shoulder charger. Ramji, Christian Sober Jovam, Delasoma, Magitra, Lois or Taylor Dory, Julius Sambat and Hiji Chilla, three theatre dog, gone to the cemetery, Lani Subdemon or somebody. Dollar county too long to the long sent the neck up to that either. Now simply new one on the horse. Ya somebody in the road, can't do the thing. Three teller could talk with them, but somebody can get up with ya only three to double them, but three easy me for Hako, the Demba is to the sun or some gums with two, some gums. Two are legendary. This on that the Demba and some of them. Three gums, three sent the touch in Basara, sent the Tama to the Gomjaya, Principal, Pena, Chenet, Gonda, Flacton, she up the Tordona, Yamicia, Tatiton, some were headed, Gomja. To some Gomson, my England jokes and checked it. Mali drop after the 70 to that 7 check were headed.
So then coming to the root text, it begins with Gema. So now when the bardo of this life is dawning upon me, I will abandon laziness, for which life has no time, enter undistracted the path of study, reflection, and meditation. So now, having obtained a precious human body, it says we should study, reflect, and meditate. Study literally means to hear, and so what do we need to hear? We need to hear or listen to. We need to listen to the teachings on karma, the infallibility of karma, cause and effect. So you need to hear that this there is not just this life, but there are past and future lives, and there is karma, cause and effect. And that actually is the root of all Dharma teachings, is the teachings on karma. Because then once you know that, you will not do anything at least that brings yourself down, that harms yourself. So because you recognize through the teachings on karma, what is it that brings suffering to yourself and also others? And what is it that brings happiness? So through the teachings on karma, you will naturally be unmistaken as to what to do and what not to do. So the studying or the hearing here refers to the teachings of karma and also the twofold truth. And then reflection. Then we reflect on that. So you think about it. Is it true or is it not true? So you reflect, for instance, the nature of humans and animals who coexist in this world. Actually, even though our illusory bodies are different, our mind still is the same. Our experiences, our feelings are the same, even though due to our karma we experience different experiences of happiness and suffering. But it all comes down to the karma that we have accumulated. And so when you observe that, when you reflect on that, you recognize how important karma is. And then who accumulates karma? It is the mind. So you reflect in this way when you are contemplating karma, for example. Lord Jigten Sumgön had said, cause and effect, or karmic ripening, is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So the frightful and really miserable manifestations of animals, for example, are all a natural manifestation of afflictive emotions. And then gods and humans, for example, are the natural manifestation of love and compassion, temporarily. And ultimately, love and compassion naturally will manifest as enlightenment, the three kayas of Buddha. So all of this arises from knowing what to do and what not to do, the difference between virtue and non-virtue. So when you reflect on that, then a certainty arises in you and you think that this is really true. So that is studying or listening and reflecting. And then lastly, meditation. And so all of that ultimately comes down to the mind. The root of samsara and nirvana is the mind. And if you purify your mind, you attain actual freedom. Then you have the freedom to create your own happiness and also to create your own suffering. So therefore, to avoid suffering, we purify our mind stream. So as Milarepa had said, if the mind becomes pure, then the 10 virtuous actions will naturally arise, and the 10 non-virtuous actions will naturally settle into their natural place. So when you reflect in this way, and you really think about karma, so how it naturally arises, and as Milarepa had said, for example, then you will naturally, when you know that, you will naturally not kill, for example, because you will understand that is the cause of suffering. You will naturally turn away, and you will naturally turn to a mind of love and compassion. And so regarding meditation, it is also, as it is said in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, in verse number 36, where it says, in brief, whatever you do, you should look at the state of your mind. Always examine your mind. Am I being afflicted? What arises in the mind? Am I being selfish? Are there thoughts of love and compassion? Always look at your mind. And in this way, on the relative level, when you practice the relative truth, you hold on to the mind of love and compassion. And then on the ultimate level, you realize the twofold truth. And so this is the meditation, or study, reflection, and meditation. So this is how you practice them. This is you really think about the meaning and then you incorporate it into your mind. So meditation means that after you have really understood and reflected, then through meditation you are purifying your mind. And so that means, for example, through sustaining mindfulness and heedfulness. It means to meditate, to practice shamatha and vipassana, to develop the discriminating wisdom. It basically means to engage in meditation practice. So that is the meaning of enter undistracted, the path of study, reflection, and meditation. And so once you understand the meaning of that, and then you recite this prayer, as you express these words, the meaning of these words that you express have to appear in your mind in this way.
따뜻하 다지니 고대기 따뜻 마고도 난거 요래 이랑이 속되면 도다고 대방근이들이 그다 나와 탐지랑 그 셈지 누가를 두고 셈다랑 그 셈이 죽바를 말이야 다 맞았던 거 인연도 될 돌로지 셈다랑 그 셈이 콜 카카레스 말레스 셈지 죽바레스 람한들 랑 말한 이게 제발 다 맞았던 거 제발 람 소리 내로 오 실이 레롱 떠나 물을 보치래 람 말하는 애들이 유목도 레롱 와도 좋다 도더래 유목 바깥에 다 세단 거 봐도 오 문이 샘적들 람도 상만한 것들이 다 제발했어 코도 더래시 샘제는 거 이쪽 바래서 로를 이쪽 바래서 제타고 살모도 들 남상 이랑 그랑 것들이 좀 되게 참 랑게 다 나바가 참 생고 나는 요래 잡을 거 참 서로도 요래 나와 사집은 남 샘들 저도 세번 나날 때 샘들 가리오래 나 신랑랑지 나 신랑랑 가서 모저자 되는 얘네랑 도와 정도 참아지더니 가서 그 트벅거리 거기다 도와를 줘서 트벅거리 강리 트벅거리들이 지 약고래 대 말이지 트벅거리지 사바다 니지 쪽 달라들이 다와들이 사제기생 사제단 게디는 권소좀 때라서 와요래 마다반 로아를 유몽 독속을 죽었대 미성성을 해 이런 미성성 때양들이 선대식이 뭐지 연애한테 그 레디 싸요 때마다 받더니 별로 아토토 과열때 철쪽을 때마다 바로 쪽을 때당지래 연애한테 선대식이 뭐죠 아마 독서는 대하고는들이 예를들이 나신이라고 가서 무저사 탑재 거성그랑 이 거성 코너 다 맞아 이나도 하고 그래 나신 남라 거성 무저사서 이제 죽고 거성들 죽고 남과다고 샘 참아 로로 센서만 찍으셔 로그 자초다고 오 딱바 산초 생거라도 딱바 사지가 거다 생각 차도가스 오 마다면 내가 미움벌레 넘어가서 로로 차도가스 오, 니가 셈제적으로 될 것은 먼저서 오, 탐지 최단도 요 것은 그 공서 맞이 봐도 상을 다때 대다를 하고 그랬지.
So then what is the result of having listened, reflected, and meditated? So as a result, we need to become free from distraction. And so it says, so making perceptions and mind the path and realize the three kayas. So the appearances, or these perceptions here, or appearances, what are the appearances? So now, what appears, what we perceive, is from a dualistic perspective. We perceive self and other, a duality of samsara and nirvana. So there are many perceptions, many appearances. But in the 37 Bodhisattva practices on the ultimate truth, it says, the way things appear is your own mind. So when you think about, you reflect on that mind, the mind of all sentient beings in the 6 realms and your own mind, is it the same or is it not the same? So, for example, think about yourself or human beings and animals. So it might seem at first that we are different, we are separate beings. But actually we are not, because the basis of our mind is one and the same. difference lies in having or not having entered this path, so entered undistracted this path, or making perceptions in mind the path. So if one has made it the path, and if one understands the mind, then one may take birth as a human being. And if one has not taken things as the path, one has not entered the path, then one is carried away by the karmic winds, the afflictive emotions, and takes birth, for example, as a poisonous snake, as a manifestation of hatred or anger. So when you look at this snake, for example, then if you know that, this point, you will think that our mind is actually the same. Difference just lies in having or not having entered the path. And because that snake has not entered the path, that's why he's now appearing as a snake. But the basis of our mind is exactly the same, just like energy, light energy. And if you think about that, if you understand that, then you will actually follow your own law of karma. And that is the law of Buddhism. It is the law of karma. In the world, you have outer laws, but we have it all within the mind. And so then it says, so making perceptions in mind the path and realize the three kayas. So it is said that everything has the nature of the three kayas, and specifically the 6 realms of samsara are all nirmana kayas. And then so you might wonder, like, how can there be nirmana kayas? Because nirmana kaya is what we call a Drikung, and then we think that a Drikung, a nirmana kaya, is a great being. So clearly not all sentient beings are Drikungs or nirmana kayas. Because we think that normally a Drikung is someone, a nirmana kaya is a manifestation of love and compassion. So on the one hand there is. So there are pure and impure nirmana kayas, and the pure nirmana kaya arises out of love and compassion and then manifests as the Buddhas and the teachers, the Sangha, the 3 jewels, and so forth. And then you also have the impure nirmana kayas, and these are all the sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsara. They are the Drikungs or nirmana kayas, meaning the emanations of the 6 afflictive emotions, especially the 3 lower realms. So the mind of a sentient being in the 3 lower realms still possesses Buddha nature, but for as long as they have not purified karma, they will stay in the lower realms. And whenever it becomes purified, karma becomes purified, then there still is Buddha nature. And that's why they have the nature of the 3 kayas. For example, it's just like you're washing a dirty towel. You just have to keep washing it until it's clean, basically. So it's just like that. And once it is completely clean, you have just Buddha nature in the natural state. So for the 3 kayas and the various emanations, they are pure and they are impure. And the Dharmakaya, one of the kayas, is the basis, the ground, which is like space. It is the naturally pure mind. And on that level, all beings of the 6 realms are one and the same. And then the Sambhogakaya appears like a rainbow in the sky and is the natural manifestation of bodhicitta. So when bodhicitta is present, then naturally the Pure Land and the pure Buddha forms appear. So when you understand that, when you read this line here and realize the 3 kayas, then these ideas will come to your mind. Then you will think that if there is bodhicitta, then the Pure Lands will arise. And if the mind is impure, then the impure karmic winds are going to take the mind to take birth in the various realms of samsara. Nevertheless, everything, all phenomena, ultimately have the nature of the 3 kayas. So that is the point to understand here.
많이 봤을 때 그래야지. 다 이봐 물론 봐도서. 이마다 물론 봐도 찾는데 뭐 그러냐 밤에 방송에 제발 민내로 그러나 줘서 물론다 년발이야 제발 가리도 야 물론 뭐니 년발 나지 내가 제가 요래 걔들이 물론 간에 제발 싸고 오는더니 물론 간에 대도 서와 탐지 년발 나지 박차 연구 요래 대해서 이제 하거든요. 물론지 왜 살았으면 다 물론 살았던 거 살았는데 물론나 물론 그러면 물론 사실 봐 물론 몇백가는 하고 지시들 내데 근데 물론 레시 하고 요래 물론은 다이지 인정 상태 적도 요래 바도를 제서 인정 상태 적도 다다지 체제 뒤에를 위해 요배되는 무보다 지만을 지내 우보도 용물이 지금 레시한 조고 그래 물론 감이들이 바도는 물론이 직발에 물론만이 다사 파티디 다 물람이 하고 이 물람을 살을 찾지 물람으로 삼미를 듣고 있어도 돼 요래들이 김바이 내려고 물람 종이 저러고 있어 장도 돈은 물람이 방 옷이나 라브리 이 물람 옷이 다 물람을 했지 들이 다 물람을 공수는 들이 자다 지으라서 막가를 로봇 저지네 이 타고시 가는 거 저거 요래 이제는디 샘들 이제 내다 상통대 공부가리더니 샘도 싸워 차는 샘들이 잡들 하고 그러래 너희 답지를 잡들 하고는 너희 답지 타지 사통이 통한 거요래 통을 다 무시 찬도 말이 세고 잡들 샘코로 잡도 다운나 너희 잡지 샤비 디 답지 통고 요래 속차 통고 베스다 샘들이 상통 전에 상통들로 샘싸고 차는데 들이 하고 그래 들이 참전 쳐봐야 하고 요래 들이 물란도를 저러 살장도 타고 생각 좋고 요래 야 디스강가를 간도를 좋고 그래 니들 참전 통거래 그래서 물란도 거래서 들이 물란도 저러 살장도 도나 들어줘야 되냐고 말이지 계속 다가지 코고 다가지 막으로 들어가서 종라도 다 산인을 내가 제토면서 때려와 니고 니 속대들이 또 먹을래 디알레사크요래 들어줘래 베스다 하고래 말랑원에 봐요 봤담 이 라블라 차르지 너는 제 통만하기가 미송 말랑냐미라 라블라와 사차는 거요래 말랑 마차도 요래 등나들이 마음 체험 타마들이 마음 개발미지 내가 개발사 앞에나 또다 무서웠다더니 조금이 봐나 따라코도 여기들 치료 브랑원이 들라코도 브랑원이 내가 거기고 요티 디스텔들이 시비는 사마등이 있지 내도 토마 마음 개발미지 내가 개발사 왔다지 마음은 데로 들이들 마음 그 고치고요 대다고 상담한 거래 돼
So the Bardo of living, the Bardo of living is the time from when we are born until we die. And in the Bardo of living, what's most important is an undistracted mind. Then next, second is the Bardo of dreaming. And it says, Gema, now when the Bardo of dreams is dawning upon me, I will abandon the heedless corpse-like sleep of ignorance and settle the mind in its natural state without distraction. And then recognizing dreams, I will train in transforming into clear light. So regarding the practicing with the dreams, so here we are practicing with dreams. First of all, we need to ask ourselves, is there a difference between the dream state and the waking state, the daytime? In your dream, while you're dreaming, that is your reality, and you engage in all kinds of activities in the dream. And in the dream, you experience the same feelings of happiness and suffering as you do during the waking state, due to those karmic imprints present in your mind. And so if the mind is trained in sustaining a state of clarity, that becomes a method to recognizing the luminosity of the dream state. So you bring the mindfulness that you have developed in the waking state into the dream state when you're sleeping. And that means that you recognize, oh, this is a dream. You recognize you're in a dream. And when you recognize that, then all kinds of fear will naturally disappear. And then also you will recognize these fearful appearances of the Bardo, and they will also collapse at that point when you recognize that this is the Bardo. And so now, for as long as you have the karma of this material body in this life, you and cling to the true existence of this lifetime, you will continue to experience whatever karma needs to be experienced. But then that karma comes to an end, and then the perception, the appearance changes. And so then therefore we also need to recognize that the Bardo and the dreams are one and the same. So first, to recognize the dream state, first you recognize, when you practice the dream yoga, first you recognize the dream state, and then gradually it is referred to as you recognize the subtle luminosity of the dream state, and then the deep luminosity of the dream state, referring to the luminosity of the deep sleep state, actually. And so then once you progress in this way, you can, as it says here, when you recognize dreams, I will train and transform in transformation and clear light. So it begins with recognizing the dream state. When you recognize the dream state, you know that I am in a dream. And then if you habituate to that and you always recognize the dream state, then you can begin to transform yourself in the dream state. For example, you can transform yourself into a bird and fly anywhere, or you can travel to a pure land and so on. And so these abilities come from the meditation you have trained in the waking state. So it is the mind that is habituated to shamatha and vipassana and so on. The mind that has become very clear. And when the mind is very clear, then the mind knows that it is all pervasive. It pervades the entire universe and all sentient beings. So this is what you see then when the mind becomes very clear. And so then you might think that, at some point some clairvoyant ability arises. But it's not quite like that. Nothing really actually changes in the mind, but it is just that it becomes cleared. For example, when an ocean that is a bit muddy, when the mud settles and it becomes clear, then you can see what's at the bottom of the ocean, what has already been there, but what you couldn't see before, all the little animals on the bottom of the ocean. So this happens when you have trained the mind in shamatha and vipassana. Then the mind becomes very clear. And with a clear mind, you are able to recognize the confused perceptions around you, as whatever appears. And so recognizing that and having a clear mind then in the dream state, you may be able then to transform and travel to pure lands and so forth, or wherever the mind wishes to go, because you have recognized that the mind already is all pervasive, pervades the entire universe and all sentient beings. And so then it says, I must not simply slumber like an animal, but combine sleep with realization. This is crucial. Normally, we think that sleeping actually is a good thing, and we say that if I don't get enough sleep, it's not good, because then I can't do my job tomorrow, I can't work tomorrow. But actually, deep sleep, is also a karma of ignorance. We are actually accumulating the cause of birth as an animal in the deep sleep state. And therefore, we can see that even the slightest mindfulness is really very significant. So it says that ideally, in the highest way, the luminosity appears in the dream state. Or in the kind of medium case, the dream state, dreaming stops. Or in the least case, virtue arises in the dream. So ideally, you recognize the dream state, which is called you recognize the luminosity of the dream state. And if not, in the middling or medium case, the dreaming stops, is interrupted. You can stop the dreaming. And in the end, at least, finally, you are able to, at the very least, you're able to remember virtue in the dream. You have virtuous dreams. For example, if you practice virtue during the daytime, then you will also remember virtue during the dream state. For example, if you're spinning a prayer wheel during the daytime, then you might also dream of spinning a prayer wheel. Or you might cultivate love and compassion for the beings in your dream. So virtue will arise in your dream state. And so this is actually the start of practicing dream yoga. So when you read this line, reflect in this way. So in brief, there are many different levels of practicing the luminosity of the dream state, the dream yoga. But one method that really anybody can practice is that before you go to sleep, as you fall asleep within a state of non-distraction, an undistracted state. And then the very moment you wake up from sleeping, immediately be mindful, be heedful. If you're able to wake up in a state of mindfulness, then that is probably sufficient, at least for those people who are not that diligent in practice. And then they can attain, it is said, enlightenment in the Sambhogakaya in the Bardo, arising as the Yidam deity. And so also what you can do for that is you fall asleep, remembering whatever Yidam deity you practice, your Yidam deity. So you bring to mind the Yidam deity and recite a few mantras, or you can also listen to a recording of the mantra as you fall asleep. And then the moment you wake up from sleeping, you can remember the Yidam or the seed syllable of that Yidam, like the Hung or the Shri and so forth. So this is something that anybody can practice. And if you practice in this way, then probably later you can attain enlightenment as a Sambhogakaya and the Bardo, and this is actually, it really becomes a practice of the dream yoga, the dream Bardo. So this is the easiest instruction on the dream yoga practice, a dream Bardo practice.
Malamda ni par che tawale yomari malam ti par che mdo de do tawale le ka ngam ji le ko yore zabli ga do na bana to che tabji yogo yore ram ge no ka tawarte malam tawri ti semre dang sia bdo ko sende che se me mari te isra te jumata ot ni ka na wa de malam de che par mdo 물람대 무슨리 망고라 이제 바도 물람대는 이제 로요에 삼 담았다나 들려는 칼고 나와 디디 총들 로요에 되게 돼서 팽그레지
So now we think that the daytime, the waking state, is real, and the dreams are not real. So actually, that is not the case. It is just now we have a physical body, and so for as long as the karma is present of this body, we will stay in this kind of existence. And then once we go on, the lifetime, the appearances of this lifetime will actually become like a dream. There's really not the slightest difference. So when you reflect on that, when you recognize that, you can really see there is no difference between the waking state and the dream state. And it all depends on the karma that we have created. For however long we have that karma, this specific appearance or kind of existence will remain for that time. And we can see in this world, it happens in many different ways. It appears in so many different ways. Karma manifests, but it's all the same in terms of being like a dream. So when you recognize that, you will see everything, this world and everything that is happening in this life. It's all just a dream, and the mind on the basis remains the same. So in brief, what you need to understand here is that there is no difference between the waking state and the dream state. And actually the dream is just as real as the waking state. And later, when you leave this life and go on into the Bardo is just like a dream too. Then that will become an actual experience. And so when you recognize that, the dream-like nature of the waking state and of this life, then the fixation to the true existence of the appearances in this life, in the waking state, will get lesser. So that is the benefit of this understanding.
Something Bardos was thanks to some goes on jelly, Yamin, Lam, Shortly, Lodo, Govni, Zong, Tatokti, Language, Namdo, and Tala, the Gold Rochester, Ranger, Chiva, Richie, but they must have part something but also. The Chetan Gold Rochester, totally put me by your Rochester, Ramdong, is Nami Charlotte. touch 같이 고미야서 고미에서 갖고 우리들 로직들들이나 이 파제 삼티 봐도 안 초크요래 고로직으로 이렇게 차서 대만에 빠졌으니 남양 접어 손나 방시네 영미 재미 답장을 줘 남양 접어 지바들 이 저당 센데 몸도 남이체 되냐 천든 접어 얻는 철이 바들 남도 샤로마들 무보는 지만이시네 어디디리디 말 딘딘데 차당 똑바 차당 락바 차당 초아래도 똑바디 초아디 제가 저는 초바지 이 샤들을 같이 샤들한테 라그 지식강이 사는 네바메 봐 쳐달라면도 놀러 때만이 과들이 이 영화미 봐든 저만미 와지 남양 철든 철 맞춰지 치버리냐고 하고 그래 철수를 빼려 매실 시당은 오사이 열들 시당 등이 설문 띠보 되나 지시배 봐 그래 지시당 냠的시당 연구요래 지시당 냠的시당 연구한테 나도 라규가 말해 지시 싸와니 매발 서로 열지 걸었더니 시당은 대들 차당 요모가 딴 거야. 요모 라주 봐서 요모 라주 봐도 쇼크도 아마도 대세는 됐다고 그러지. 남은 추버서로 빠지지. 요모 라주 봐도 마셔나 사실 출발해 연구할 때다 하고요. 색하고요. 되는 철만 소지 제발이 상상도 하고 그러지.
So then next for the Bardo, of samadhi or meditation. So it says, Gema, now when the bardo of samadhi is dawning upon me, I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion. So we have entered the path of practice, practicing listening, reflection, and meditation, starting from the reflection on the four thoughts that turn the mind, until we ultimately realize those four yogas of Mahamudra. Basically, actually, when we reach the third yoga of one taste, and you have really gained confidence in that, in yourself. Until that, this entire time of practice, so starting from the four thoughts until one taste, this entire period is referred to as the bardo of samadhi or meditation. And so then once you have realized this stage of one taste, equal taste, then the mind becomes unchanging, stable. And it is said then that within that state of one taste, the self-knowing primordial awareness arises on its own. So you will gain certainty through the experience of one taste. So some people say that that happens actually when you reach the fourth stage of non-meditation, but that is a little bit difficult, and it probably already arises at the stage of one taste. So in any case, so at this point you abandon all forms of distraction and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping. So this distraction and delusion, when the mind stays in a state of practice, it shouldn't become controlled by delusion. So sometimes we do stay in a state of practice, we are practicing, but at the same time the mind is still controlled by various confusions or delusions. And now what is a delusion or confusion? It is when a thought appears in the mind and a feeling appears in the mind, and you cling to it and you hold that to be as true. So you think that about anything, you think that this is how it is or this is not how it is. So it is a grasping it is a holding of something to be true. And then due to that, we develop thoughts of more coarse thoughts of attachment and anger and so on. And their subtle counterparts are hope and fear. So all these various feelings arise, and these feelings are what we call delusions or confusions. If the mind is in a state of mindfulness, an undistracted mind, then no matter how many of these thoughts appear, they will not harm you, affect you in any way. They will just come like a wave on water and then again subside. That is if the mind is undistracted and doesn't grasp at them. So it is important to understand the difference between being deluded and not being deluded or confused. So when you are confused or deluded, then for example, you get angry at somebody, and then this resentment, this negative feeling about that person that you're angry at, stays in your mind, and you think that this is just how it is. So that is when you're unmindful. So if you're mindful, then the anger arises together with the mindfulness, and therefore the feeling of anger, the affliction, does not become like ordinary and unrestrained. If you're unmindful and the anger arises, then it becomes a real unrestrained anger, an ordinary afflictive emotion. So this is really what you need to look at. Is the anger or the emotion that arises in me, is it ordinary and unrestrained or not? Does it arise within mindfulness? So if an emotion arises, but it's not ordinary and unrestrained, then also you will not become confused. And that kind of emotion can easily become purified. It easily dissolves again. So it's important that you see here what is the difference between delusion and an undiluted state.
탑다는 저어서 많이 봐 생사람이 희지마 되더니 살지 좀바도 동전들이 강도만 봐지 뭐 샤지나 되는 동동지 라송은 좀 봐서 동지 미제라 유민지 미송 되게 밤에 봐 가지 연구들 남도도 친구 같으면 저 라와리 샤르티 지스니랑 되게 밤에 봐 차고 요래 되는 남도 속치 못 살고 가로 뒤가비들이 비시오는 되게 되는 윤받지라더니 윤모냠들이 이시 오고서 그때 너는 지식이 잡채했더니 의미가 잘로 요래 탑다는 하나죠. 탑다는 데 이제 다 사자지고 다 전는 다 위험 말이 성공 라시를 때는 나그랬다. 그래서 살로도 잡살로 딴 거면 라비 그 잡대래. 이제 다 왔다 또 나들이 잡대 하고 이미 탑다는 하나죠. 영미 탑다는 하나죠. 많이 봐 대야랑이 됐다 3,000만 보셔라. 살렌즈미랑 셈데에서 말하래베 살렌즈미랑 셈데 저좀 연방 오시는 직접 타라서 많이 해도 너 살람이 되는 살람이 되는 맛이라 연구 말이 사고는 재미도 가가고 오는 말이 좀 매번 가는 거예요. 니 당신이 다 이제는 뭐지만 말도 받지 마다고 하고 되게들이 이제 고아가 되게 고아 되니 냠이 람가 되니 이제 미람지기 연구를 해야지.
And so then, and rest, it says rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping. The state that is the mind needs to be clear. The undistracted state is a state of clarity. When the mind is undistracted, and the mind is vividly clear and knowing, aware of what happens. So that is the clarity aspect. The emptiness aspect is not to grasp at whatever arises, not to hold any thought arising to be true, to be real. And so when we become unmindful, we become unmindful when a thought arises and we follow that thought. We pursue the thought because we think that it's true, this is how something is. Then we become unmindful. If a thought arises, even a very strong thought arises, and you are mindful, it is said that the thought, the affliction must arise together with mindfulness, within a state of mindfulness. And so then mindfulness is already present, and therefore mindfulness is all pervasive. And when mindfulness is pervasive, then naturally the mind will be in a state of non-distraction. So what arises will again dissipate. And so then it says this infinite state, so literally this state without extremes or limitations or any boundaries. That is, when one has realized the view of Mahamudra, one realizes that the mind, just like space, is without center and without boundary. It is all pervasive, but you don't actually have to think about that. You don't have to think the mind is all pervasive, or is it all pervasive or not. This pervasiveness actually arises naturally. So this experience of pervasiveness is nothing that you actually fabricate, but it arises naturally as a result of having realized the view, the nature of the mind. And it arises from this state that is free of distraction and grasping. It means basically all that need to be done is just to stay within this state that is free from distraction and free from grasping. So that's really the essence of this pointing out the nature of the mind instructions that many people request. Also, Milarepa had said, when you stay in a state of clarity that is without any grasping, then the state of one-pointedness will spontaneously arise, naturally arise. So that is the crucial point, is that it arises spontaneously or naturally. So it is enough to just stay in an undistracted state without any grasping. And so then you don't actually have to think in terms of everything is pervasive and so forth. Like the mind, is it all pervasive? Now I meditate on the mind like space. You don't have to actually even reflect on that. It just happens naturally as a result of being undistracted and without grasping. So basically, you don't even have to recognize or think about how this world doesn't really exist inherently. Basically, but now once you understand, once you have realized this all-pervasiveness of mind, then just naturally you know that things lack inherent existence. So when you do not grasp at anything to be real, possessing any real existence whatsoever, when you don't hold this universe and all beings to truly exist, then just naturally, you recognize the all-pervasive nature of the mind. It's nothing that actually you have to accomplish or do something to it. So that is the basis that need to be understood. And when you understand the basis, then the path, the experience will then actually arise naturally.
Tesom military, the Imatawari, Tesom Lapto Damador, the Dima, the Tesom the body, Tesom the Madraga Battery on the Tanan Jungle already.
And then gaining stability in the two stages, generation and perfection. Generation and perfection. So it refers to the generation and completion stages. And regarding the way in which we train in generation and completion, so there's all kinds of different individuals that train in different ways depending on their dispositions. For example, some people are more drawn to the elaborate practices, and some are more drawn to the unelaborated practices. But in general, generation and completion must be unified. So first of all, we have to gain stability in the generation stage. And so for that, we need to understand what is the generation stage, and you need to really gain a trust or confidence in the generation stage. And so how can we develop this? So there are two ways of approaching or practicing the generation stage. So one is from the perspective of the fundamental basis. So we need to understand the ground, the basis. And the second one is from the perspective of experience and practice. So actually the basic understanding of the generation stage is actually extremely important. With regard to that, the Drikung Master Dhammaraja had said, when you understand that, when you realize that all that appears and exists is the form of the deity, then you have perfected the generation stage of the secret mantra. This is extremely important. So the entire universe, everything that appears and exists, or the universe and all sentient beings, there are many appearances, pure and impure. There are the 6 realms of samsara and so forth, arising out of the 6 afflictions. But what is the basis, the ground of all of that? We need to understand that it is the form of the deity. Everything has the fundamental nature of the deity. Also, Chigden Sumgön had said, I'm a yogin who has realized that my parents, the yidams and the 6 realms are all one. It's all one. So what do we need to understand here? The outer universe, no matter how limitless it may be, it all is comprised of the 5 elements. And the inner sentient beings, however many there are, within their minds, they all possess the 5 afflictive emotions. And therefore, the body and the mind of a single person represents the entire outer universe and all sentient beings. The universe and all beings are actually contained within the body and the mind of a single person. So when you reflect in this way, you realize it's all the same. And it is just a difference in maturing or not maturing. When we mature the mind, then the afflictive emotions, when they mature, they become wisdom. So that's the only difference. So on the outer level, when the afflictions have matured, the 5 elements are actually the 5 dakinis, or the 5 mothers by nature. And the inner 5 afflictions are the 5 male Buddhas. And so in this way, through understanding this, momentarily the mind can mature. So there is actually then, once the mind matures in this way, it sees that there's actually nothing at all throughout the 6 realms that is impure. Everything is actually pure. So everything that appears and exists is seen as the form of the deity. That is the perfection of the generation stage of the secret mantra of the Vajrayana. So that is really what we need to get at, understand, in terms of the generation stage practice of the deity. So it is especially to be applied when all kinds of things appear in the mind, all kinds of pure and impure thoughts and so on arising in the mind. There's all kinds of thoughts constantly arising in the mind, and for as long as these many thoughts arise, we have not yet perfected the generation stage. So it's very helpful for that to understand this fundamental nature, the basis. And then with that understanding, you can quickly separate yourself from any doubts regarding that. If you don't really understand this fundamental basis, even though you might practice the deity, it still will be quite difficult to actually develop a pure perception. So we still continue to see things in a pure and in an impure way. So in brief, whenever we see things in an impure, negative way, it is because of the affliction of aversion in our mind. So that is what needs to be purified, and the reason why we practice the generation stage is in order to purify these impure perceptions. So that is why we practice generation stage. And when you habituate to that and you understand the fundamental basis, then a certainty arises in your mind, a conviction arises. And then with this conviction, you will also naturally see the ultimate truth through the pure perception developed through the generation stage. And the ultimate truth, which is the completion stage, that is explained in the Mahamudra teachings, where it says, without a single thought, decisively look at the ultimate nature. So the perfection or the completion stage is the view of Mahamudra, the realization of Mahamudra. When the mind rests in the natural state within the view, in the completion, don't think about anything whatsoever in terms of existence or non-existence. And then that becomes naturally the completion stage, which is the view of Mahamudra. So together, in union, the creation of generation and completion represent the unified state of Mahamudra, which is the union of clarity and emptiness. The clarity aspect is the generation stage, and the emptiness aspect is the completion stage. And their union is the natural state of the mind, which is this unity of clarity and emptiness. That is your innate nature. And it is actualized when you habituate to the generation and completion stages. And you attain stability in it when you are free of doubts, which is why it is important to have this understanding of the fundamental basis in order to be free of doubts. So that's extremely important, because once you have doubts in your mind, even if you practice, that will lead to an endless chain of many different thoughts. And the doubts in your mind obscure the nature of the mind. So until you have completely freed yourself of all doubts, you must train in a pure perception again and again.
Sawa pang ne teke gonde de nyomong tropo wang ma tang che so ni sawa pang chi ba de ni jeli rang re do chimbo kunne sang ni ti du sa do ji sa te ma ri du ba la do tra wa ji so de men de du ba du ra du ba sawa la de du ma do sa de to ba ja de ka le de ra de 감정 뒤쳐져 되는 사방데 는 덕발이래도 같이 이제 저거 사빌로데 요 말이 요나 습기술로 사제 토고 사제 대학대 대로 마도 이 가면 와되네 이제는 근데 사업을 지저분도 유목 출범왕도 되나 레도도 차단의 왕 똑같이 대왕도 마찬가지 소송
So then, next line it says, at this time of single point of meditation, having given up activity, and so forth. I must not fall under this way of affliction and delusion. So the having giving up all activity. So what that means is that we give up hopes and fears with regard to our activities, not the actual activities per se. But for example, there is here one shouldn't have this intense ambition. I must accomplish this certain activity. One just naturally engages in one's conduct through like single pointedness and non-distraction. And one engages in the activities, but there is no like strong hopes and ambitions that I must accomplish something, or if something is not easily accomplished, one does not insist on kind of force something to be accomplished. Basically, one is content with whatever comes along, but there is no thought of I must by all means, I have to do this, I have to accomplish this. The only thing that really has to be accomplished then is the state of enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. But aside from that, one does not fall under the power of hopes and fears and attachment and aversion. So Dharma friends, please take a break for 20 minutes.
Dear Dharma friends, in this break we will be doing a Kurupule Lung. So for those of you following on YouTube, this will be a separate video on our Garchen Buddhist Institute channel, which we will be setting up in 3 minutes. Thank you, and we'll see you then.
The